Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and it has been a busy. I was actually a little worried that I wasn't going to get this episode out this Friday, but I am glad that the time has been provided that I can actually share this with you today. I am having a conversation with Lisa Campion. Many of you are familiar with her work. She is the author of The Art of Psychic Reiki. And Lisa is a master psychic and energy healer and author who has dedicated her life to helping people access their intuition and inner power. And with over 30 years of experience, she combines practical tools with deep metaphysical wisdom. And if you are part of this Reiki radio community, not only may you have heard Lisa and I talk about her book, The Art of Psychic Reiki, a few years back, but you also know that I very much believe in our intuitive work being very supportive of our energy healing, and actually both our energy healing and our intuitive work just being aspects of our natural design and ability and our function. So I'm excited to share this conversation with you today. Lisa and I, we spoke about psychic abilities, whether we are born with them or if it's something that we can develop. We also talk a little bit about the paranormal and what her experiences have been with that. And she talks about psychic self-defense. Um, yeah, there's so many topics that we cover in relationship to psychic work and energy work. So I hope that you do enjoy it. And if you want to know more about Lisa and her work, be sure to visit her website, lisacampion.com. You can follow her on Instagram at Lisa X Campion. And the links for everything are down in the show description, of course. And I also wanted to let you know that she does have a podcast called The Miracle of Healing podcast. So be sure to check that out as well. So get comfortable, beautiful alchemist, and enjoy this conversation. I will, of course, see you on the other side. Okay, so we are here today with the beautiful Lisa Campion, which, if you've been listening to Reiki Radio for a while, you will remember she was here during the launch of the Art of Psychic Reiki, actually. So that was several years ago. So I'm excited to have you back for a new conversation. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions for you because what you focus on, a lot of people have questions about. And I remember years ago when I first met you and we had the conversation about the art of psychic Reiki, it almost seemed not rebellious, but it was something that a lot of people weren't talking about at the time. The relationship between intuition and Reiki. And so your book, in a lot of ways, I think helped a lot of people feel okay in what it was they were experiencing. So I wanted to start with just asking you a bit about that. Like, what came first, your psychic development or Reiki, and how have they been married with you?
The psychic came first, Yolanda. I was, definitely one of those I see dead people kids.
Mm.
So, I grew up with a kind of extreme psychic gift. It certainly was back then. I was born in the 60s. So I was growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s and trying to figure out like what the heck was going on, what was I experiencing? And I was seeing spirits. I knew things about people. I was an empath. I could see energy. It was a lot.
Yeah.
For a kid, and especially for back then where there was really no conversation, it wasn't something you could talk about. There were no podcasts, no psychics on TV, no books, no new bookstores, no internet. Think about it. Like, it was just really like something that I had to figure out on my own, which I found actually quite difficult, painful, and lonely for a lot of it. So I spent really the first 20 years of my life trying to figure out how to manage my gift and what was going on. And that's when I started working as a psychic. So I was 19 when I started working as a psychic. Yeah. And then I figured out really quickly that I didn't have enough skill. Like I was a good psychic, but I didn't really know how to help people. So I went back to school and became a therapist. And then for a long time, I combined those things together. And then in 1999, I learned Reiki and started teaching Reiki. And back then, it was still pretty fringe. I mean, it was still pretty weird, weird.
Right.
And back then, I was teaching psychic development and Reiki. So I was teaching psychic development classes and I was teaching Reiki classes. And I just noticed that all my students would do both. So they'd take Reiki and they would kind of pop open their psychic ability. And because that's who I am as a person, and that's what I was teaching, to me, it was sort of a really natural combination of things. And it seemed like, well, if I'm training people to be healers, wouldn't helping them open their intuition and their psychic abilities and use that? I mean, it's an incredible tool in the toolkit of a healer, right? Yeah. And back then, you're so right. It's like a lot. I had the student come up to me and she said, I had a Reiki attunement and it just popped my psychic open and I was seeing dead people walk through my room and I told my Reiki teacher about it. And her Reiki teacher just told her, like, that's not Reiki. Stop doing that. That's like, she didn't know, it's not part of the traditional teaching of Reiki. So many Reiki teachers don't know, would shut down their students. She totally got shut down. And I just think it was because it was, like you said, it wasn't talked about. It's not part of the normal, quote, old school normal Reiki training. But to me, it seemed like hand in glove, like they just really should and do go together.
Oh, 100%. And it's funny, that was my experience too. When I first started, I was told the same thing, but then I was having these experiences of when I would do sessions and then I would see and sense all of these different energies in the room and just different experiences. And so I took it upon myself to go to psychic development training because, I mean, regardless of what someone tells you you're supposed to experience, you have to trust what your actual experience is. Yeah. So, yeah, I know that I've heard from people that your book was very helpful in that way. I have to just ask you as a side note, I think just because of the time you said when you grew up, it made me think of how many magical movies there were back then. It seemed like in the 80s, there were so many movies that were like focused on magic or witches and intuition and all of these different things. So it's like it was kind of in the culture, and yet in real life, so to speak, it didn't seem like it was as accessible or as normal as it's becoming now.
No, it's definitely like, my parents were hippies. They were really good about my psychic ability. They definitely like didn't drag me to the church and throw holy water on me like happens to some people. Yeah. But they, my mom was like, it's your imagination, Yeah. Oh, you've got such a great imagination. I was like, is that what that is? I don't think that's what that is, but I didn't know, and actually I was very drawn to horror movies. Mm-hmm. So when I was like 12, when the movie Poltergeist came out, and my parents wouldn't let me go, but I went anyway. And to me, I mean, it was a terrifying movie back then, but it was a revelation because there was a psychic in it.
Yeah.
And she's a professional psychic. And I was like, you can do that? I'm going to do that. And yeah. I swore, like, that's when I decided I was going to be a professional psychic. And then she gave this like little paragraph on like what dead people were and why they got stuck and how you could cross them over. And I was like, oh my God, somebody knows something. And it was like a little piece of information that was super helpful to me. And it put me on like watching paranormal ghost stories and horror movies, trying to kind of piece together an education. And I don't know, it was a pretty scrappy education. Most of it wasn't true. There were some little nuggets of truth that slipped in there, but of course, movies, they're there to entertain you, not educate you on metaphysics. Yeah. So I got kind of a spotty education. And then it was the 80s and I was in college and it was the dawn of the new age. Thank God. And finally there were teachers, there were books, there were courses, it sort of opened more into the public in a way that I could really, sort of got my first real mentors and teachers to help me develop my skill. But yeah, the movie thing is funny. And the fantasy, I've always loved fantasy and science fiction, but I I leaned a little more into the paranormal and horror movies just because I was trying to learn,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. No, 100%. I remember my friend and I, listen, the imagination that happened and the play of what we were focused on based on so many of those movies. It's funny when you said poltergeist, all I hear in my mind is Carol Ann.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I wanted to ask you about that too, because paranormal activity is also something not often spoken about in this realm. And
Mm.
yet, a lot of people may have experiences that may fall in that category. So, just curious, from your point of view, is there any, what does that reveal to us, if anything, for people that may have those kinds of experiences?
Well, I think it's a real starter experience, and especially I know I work with so many people that have pretty bad PTSD
Yeah,
from their childhood paranormal experiences. So, like I did, grew up in a really haunted house, and I don't know if the house was haunted before I got there, or just as a very psychic child. Children with mediumship, strong mediumship skills, and psychic abilities are ghost magnets.
hmm,
So I don't know if it was pre-haunted or it was
yeah,
just haunted after I was living there. So I think that a lot of us have had pretty frightening experiences when we were kids, like that growly thing that lived under your bed, or the monster that was in your
right.
closet, or the shadow figure that walked up and down the hallway. Like those things are real. And so our as children, probably all of us were pretty psychic as children, and we might have had really terrifying experiences that made us shut it down. Or we were our parents, it freaked out our parents, and they
Yeah,
were like, knock that off right now. Like, stop doing that. I don't know what that is, but stop it right now.
yeah,
And so we just kind of shut down. And then life happens, and we learn Reiki, we study yoga, we do meditation. I always say those are the three gateways that open up our psychic ability. And then all of a sudden, boom, it pops open. And then we have a choice to kind of like you so bravely did, study to take responsibility, to make the choice to open it and study, which is really what we have to do. I mean, we have to study if we make that choice. But I think some people shut it down again because they don't know, or they're still living in a place where that's really not okay. It's really not supported,
right.
to have that exploration. So I think that the paranormal, to answer your question, it's sort of like, as we gain skill as psychics, we learn to filter out those experiences. We learn to change the channel on the TV. Like when I was little, my TV was tuned to the dead channel, which is really not that much fun. So, psychic development helps us maybe shut down our access to the astral plane, which is really where most of us hit.
Hmm.
It's kind of the bad neighborhood over there in the psychic world. So we learn to bypass the astral, and we're just going to change the channel to angel vision or ascended masters or Reiki guides, or
Yeah,
we hit a little higher up. And until we learn how to do that, we're vulnerable to the paranormal. And it's really can be quite scary. But it's not the only thing. It's not the only psychic experience possible. It does happen, and that's why I think really good psychic self-defense is super important, so we know what to do when we encounter the lower, denser energies, because they're, especially as healers, as Reiki healers, it's like, my job is to sort of take my light into the darkness, right? And work with the shadow of people. Most of the time, that's other people's trauma, but oftentimes it comes along with entities or shadow spirits, or, they're, I've never really been afraid of spirits, honestly, even when I was little.
yeah,
Living people scare the crap out of me on a regular basis.
right.
With spirits, I've never really been afraid of them. Like I just knew they don't have substance here. So I don't know if that was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but it is a super interesting, and I maintain my interest in the paranormal. It's just kind of fascinating, but I don't live there.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting listening to you say this. It reminds me of a couple things. One, I grew up in Massachusetts, and one of the houses we lived in was like this really old house. And I had a sense back then, I would see these like two young kids that were, like apparitions, you know, and it occurred to me how so many people do, like you said, have these experiences in our childhood, but even as adults now, we'll still put it in the category of like, oh, I probably made that up. I imagined that. That wasn't real. All of those things. And I think it speaks a lot to why, even when we come into practices like Reiki and these things, it's often hard for people to trust whatever it is they experience. And that's so interesting how dismissive we are of what our direct experiences may be. So I wanted to ask you about this in relation to Reiki. Have you noticed that people that like something cracks open, so to speak, have you noticed a variety? Like it's kind of across the board, very specific to the person, what their psychic or intuitive experiences may be.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in Massachusetts too, by the way. I don't know if we ever
Uh,
talked about that, but yeah, I did as well. Um, and I think like everyone has a very different journey. Different spiritual opening.
yeah.
For some people, it's really sudden, and the sudden psychic openings are can be quite disorienting. And that's like, like often due to like a near death experience you had or the death of a loved one. So sort of a close encounter with death can really
Um,
pop open our psychic very quickly, or tragedy, change in circumstances. Working with psychedelics can pop you open really quickly. A Reiki attunement can, especially that level 2 attunement. Just saying, that's the one. Um, and and it's sort of like you're suddenly like a light bulb turns on and you're like living in a whole different world, and that can be extremely disorienting. And one of the things that I specialize in working with people who have sudden psychic openings to help them navigate that. Other people, it's more strong, it's slow and sort of over time, like your awareness, your sensitivity increases, and it's a little bit more of a graceful, I think, journey when it happens more slowly. And it's very, I think, individual depending on what our psychic senses are. The visual one is the hardest, I think, for people to,
yeah.
adapt to. Sort of seeing is believing. It's one thing if you're lying in bed in the middle of the night and you sort of feel something coming into your room, or you hear something come into your room. It's a different thing if you see it.
Right.
It's a whole different level of like, oh my gosh, this just got real, right? So it's an incredibly unique experience for everybody. It depends on, what's going on in our chakra system, what clairs are open, what our life purpose is. Because I feel like our psychic skills and our psychic senses are very purposeful. Like we have those gifts for a reason, they're for something. And for each, person, it's very individual what that's for.
Oh, I'm glad you say this because I think that's also another thing. A lot of people try to, they put a lot of boundary around what they're willing to see or hear or this, because people have an idea of what they want their psychic ability to be
Yeah.
rather than learning what it actually is. So, how do
Yeah.
you work with people that may have, they're just so determined that it has to be a certain way versus helping people see exactly what you said? There's a purpose for your way.
Right, exactly. It's sort of like rule number one is drop our expectations about what we think is going to happen, and drop into the moment of what is actually happening.
Yeah.
You know, I think that another big thing is to don't compare. People get really comparison, like, well, I'm not psychic because it's not like what I see on TV, or it's not like my friend who's really psychic. Like we dismiss because it's not coming how we expect it to come.
Right.
It's not, and we're comparing to other people. And I really think there's a huge sort of myth too here that it's not psychic if you don't see it, right? So
Mm.
people have all different kinds of, we really have like 7 or 8 different psychic senses. Seeing's only one of them. And well, I didn't see anything. So I'll lead a meditation, or I'll be at a Reiki share, and I'll be like, well, what did you get? I didn't see nothing. I didn't see anything. And well, what did you feel? What did you know? What did you sense? What did you hear?
Yeah.
So I changed the vocabulary here to what did you experience and what did you perceive? Because when we say perceive, it opens us to all of the psychic senses
Yeah.
in a way that, where we can dismiss what we're getting, what we're experiencing, because we're not quote seeing anything. Like it's like somehow seeing has become synonymous with psychic, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I think about that a lot too. It seems to me, because that's what I thought initially too. I really thought, and the fact that I could sense things and feel things and these kinds of things, it was terrifying to me, but I never would have made that correlation because it wasn't visual for me.
Right.
And then once I softened and just tried to develop and understand what I was already, experiencing, I thought about it. I was like, no matter how it comes through, there's still that level of translation and understanding. So it doesn't matter whether you sense it or you see something or whatever it may be. What do you do with what you perceive? So I wanted to ask you about that too, because a lot of people, if something may come online for them, but how do you, or how did you in your personal, like, well, you weren't afraid of the things. But how do most people start to soften into a comfort of, I can still be in my authority in relationship to what I'm perceiving?
Yeah, I think it's all about having some really good psychic self-defense. Um, and that's really about boundaries,
Mhm.
learning boundaries, having a strong energy field, learning some discernment skills. So let's say we go back to our analogy of something's in your room in the middle of the night. You
Yeah.
sense it, you feel it, you hear it. So we're going to be startled, like we're like, oh my, like we have that startle feeling.
Hmm.
But wait until the startle feeling is gone and then see if you can tell if it's good, neutral, or bad, whatever walked into your room. You
Yeah.
know, every single human can do this. We do it every single time we meet another person. Every time we walk into a room, every time we're reading the room, right? We're
Yes.
feeling good, neutral, bad. And that's the sort of a fundamental rudimentary way of discernment. And if it's bad, you want to trust that. That's different than being startled. So people get startled and they think it's bad,
Right.
right? But once we let the startled feeling sort of settle, our nervous system settle, well, if it's bad, then it may be an entity that doesn't have your best interest at heart and you need some psychic self-defense to move it along. Maybe it's neutral, which a lot of them are. It's like a passing spirit. It's something from the astral plane that's wandering through. If it feels good, it's one of your spirit guides. So we don't want to, it's just Uncle Fred. He stopped by for a visit, or it's just your angel, or it's your Reiki guides who are here to help give you a healing while you're sleeping. You
Yes.
know, it can be all different kinds of things. And I think knowing, you know, um, just like if a living person came into your room in the middle of the night, you might not like that, but you wouldn't, you could call the cops, you could tell them to get out. Like we have sovereignty, we have power. And to me, psychic self-defense is like having really good street smarts, having really good boundaries, and having really good street smarts. And when we do that, I think knowing, like I never wanted to be afraid, so I always learned. And to me, knowledge was the antidote to fear.
Yeah.
So the more we know, um, we can be masterful in walking through the psychic realms without having to be afraid.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And that makes all the sense. And that brings up the other part of what you said. I really am curious of your point of view. You mentioned the strengthening of our field also being very important. And
Yeah.
so the reason I want to talk to you about this is because, again, a lot of people will be afraid if they just start sensing things or perceiving more intensely than they did before.
Yes.
And I somehow along the way, it came to me, it felt like the more that I was intentional about like cultivating my energy as through the lens of Reiki. So not necessarily just focusing on laying on hands and all of this kind of stuff, but I was more like, how do I cultivate and strengthen my energy? That felt very protective for me. And so I wanted to ask you about that, like, because some people say like just practicing Reiki alone is a protection, but do you think there's more to that? Is there more that has to come with our state of
Yeah,
mind?
I think there's more to it.
Yeah,
And I think it's having a conscious knowledge of our energy field. So when I teach psychic self-defense, it's always what I start with: good energetic hygiene,
yeah,
And and this is super important for empaths too. So I wrote a book called Energy Healing for Empaths. And I talk a lot about these energy practices in that book if anyone wants to learn more about them. But really taking responsibility for our energetic hygiene and maintenance is the first step in developing really good psychic self-defense. So that's being really grounded, knowing when you're in your body and when you've dissociated. You have no power if you're dissociated.
right.
You know, I learned that as a martial artist. You just get you just get popped if you're out of your body. And we need to clear the energy that we picked up from other people, because as we go about the world as sensitives, we absorb other people's energy, and then we can't tell what's going on. We can't tell the difference between what's happening inside of us and what's happening in the world around us.
Yeah,
So we need to clear. And then we need psychic protection, which is really, when they say get in the bubble, it's really good advice. Get in the bubble. And what the bubble is really the outside edge of your energy field. So it's usually about arm's length out, and it's got a boundary, a barrier layer, kind of like your skin. Like your skin is the boundary of your body, and it keeps the world on the outside and all your stuff on the inside. And we need that. And that boundary is really powerful. We need to strengthen it. We need to, when we do these energy management practices, if you're an empath, your boundary is probably pretty porous, like a sponge, right? And when we strengthen it, it's more solid. And that's why there's some people who can walk through the world. It's like nothing impacts them. Like
yeah,
everything kind of rolls off them. And that they have these like energy fields that are like little tanks. And we can cultivate that with practice. And it gives us a freedom or ability to manage difficult situations, to be out about in the world, to be in crowds, to be in service, to be in a Reiki session, to be on an airplane, all those things. When we have strength with our energy field, it's the first level of psychic self-defense.
yeah, yeah. Oh, you just reminded me of this too, a question, because I am that way, and that I have the ability to sense things around me, but nothing comes in, like in. However, in practicing Reiki, especially in the beginning, I felt like I was going through like this training class I didn't ask for, where I would have clients that would come that had different energetic experiences than I had, right? And there were a few of them who actually let energies in. I'm talking like in, right? And it was such an interesting thing to me. One, for me personally, it emphasized the importance of my own energetic management and being clear and grounded and all of those things that you said, right?
Yeah.
But hearing you say this, I'm curious. Let's say someone has that experience. They have something where the way they perceive or interact with energy is very uncomfortable. If they can step out of the fear, like you've been talking about, is that really revealing their gift, so to speak? Because a lot of people look at even being empathic, a lot of
Yeah.
empaths look at that sensitivity as a curse when it
Yes.
doesn't have to be that way. So is the same true for our psychic ability?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so it's the empaths that feel like things get in, because
Yeah.
they're the porous nature of their energy field, things really do get in.
Yes.
Other people's energy, like all the, you know, all the energy of the environments that we're in, and sometimes spirits can really impact, and empaths are extremely vulnerable to those things.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do with anybody, whether it's an empath or someone who's wants to develop their psychic ability, plus all empaths are highly psychic.
Mhm.
So empaths, and they usually have the full complement of psychic gifts. It's really need to double down on this. And that can be like the difference between I'm on the couch. I can't get off the couch. And I'm home with my cats watching Netflix too. I'm in the world being of service and fulfilling my life purpose,
Yeah.
that it's a daily practice. And as we practice it every day, so I do that energy management practice when I get up. I do it in between clients. I do it, halfway through Costco. I do it on the airplane. I do it before I go to bed. And over time, it's like taking your energy field to the gym and sort of strengthening the muscles. The boundary must creates a boundaries between us so that we can be powerful and masterful in the world. And especially when in the fullness of my private practice, I was seeing 20, 25 clients a week.
Yeah.
And that's 4 or 5 clients a day. Mm-hmm. And that would be extremely draining. And it is if I wasn't really just super dedicated to this energy hygiene. So as Reiki practitioners, when you're done before you do a session, you need to do ground, clear, protect. When you're done with a session, you got to do the same process before your next person comes in.
Yeah.
And clear your space as well so that we can continue to work and we don't burn out as practitioners.
Yes, such good advice. Like I do feel like we're in a little mini class right now. So I do want to get to your new book. I want to know, some details of what it's about, but I also want to ask you about the development of psychic ability, because a lot of times when we talk about these things, it sounds like, oh, well, there was some hint. There was some clue that they had this capability. But for the people listening that are like, I don't have any of these experiences. I don't sense anything. I don't see anything. I wasn't that sensitive child. Mm-hmm. Is it possible for them to still develop their ability to perceive psychically or intuitively?
It sure is. Yeah. So my latest book is called Awakening Your Psychic Ability. And it's just on that topic. And the point of it really is that psychic ability is an ability. It's a skill, just like musical ability, athletic ability, like everyone's got some. Yeah. And it just, it's a matter of training it, right? So if we see a professional athlete or a professional musician, we don't think they didn't do anything. We know how hard they work to get there.
Right.
Same thing for professional psychics. So we can work whatever our latent or natural psychic potential is. And I feel like there are two people, and I wrote this book really for two different types of people. The people that are super sensitive and open and are getting overwhelmed and they're trying to turn it off. And then the people who are trying to turn it on, like they wish they had more of that. And usually those people are like more logical, a little more like analytical minded, a little more right-brained. The truth is when we do psychic development, we need both sides of our brain. So, right, the analytical people need to learn how to quiet their analytical mind long enough to receive the psychic download. The psychic download comes more into the right brain. That's what it is. And the left brain people are the analytical ones, right? So those analytical people need to quiet and receive the download into the right brain, the intuitive brain. And that will be through their psychic senses, through feeling, through knowing, through sensing, through hearing, all of that. We need to pause and not jump to analyzing it, not jump to making sense of it. But we really do, once we receive the full download, then we shift the energy into the left brain, the analytical brain, and we start interpreting it. So we need both sides. The left brain interprets the information that we get. We need both sides of it. And so it may just be a matter of paying attention to how you feel, paying attention to what's going on in your body. I used to say, if I ever wrote a psychic development book, I would call it Pay Attention. But pay attention to how, what you're hearing. And logical people tend to dismiss all of that as common sense, or, well, that's just what I do, or that's just what I know. There's nothing special, So anyone can learn it. In fact, I'm so fascinated with this. The remote viewing. So the Army, the military developed this, incredibly accurate, powerful psychic skill called remote viewing. And they would just take anyone, literally anyone off the street, any of these people who are enrolled in the military, and train them how to do it. and get incredibly accurate information. It's super cool training. If you want to open your psychic, visual psychic, the remote viewing training you have to put a lot into it. It's quite an extensive training. Just like if you wanted to be a professional athlete, you got to put a lot into it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they just take regular old army guys and teach them how to do this.
Yeah. It's actually interesting to find out how much of what falls in this realm that the government practices as well. And a lot of
100%.
people don't know that they use
Yes, they do.
these abilities as well.
Yes, they
And
do.
I love what you're saying because it also points to this idea of, we talk a lot about awakening or like in Reiki, your true nature and all of these different things. And with you talking about our psychic ability needing to use both aspects of our mind, it points to that whole thing of like that all of this work points to unification in this realm of duality. And
Mhm.
so with that, I think a lot of times we don't consider how much of ourselves we try to avoid or dismiss rather than understand. And of course, especially when we think about like our levels of consciousness and how our mind works, if we're balanced in that, if you're using both sides, how could you not perceive?
Yeah. Well said. Well said indeed. And such a good point. So, I mean, that unity is where we're going. That
Right.
unity is where we're headed on this, ship in this ascension process, and the shift in human consciousness is towards harmonizing and integrating the dualities that we have inside of us. And, I see like that's an unfortunate duality because I see a lot of quote spiritual people who totally give up their common sense
Yeah.
and just do like a lot of crazy stuff that maybe if they had thought through it a little bit more, they'd be like, well, are you sure that's a good idea? Maybe is that enough? I don't know. Think about that one a minute,
Yeah.
um, and then also lots of people who can't, on the other side, can't feel anything. Like
Right.
they might need to really like relax and like let themselves have all the feels. And that each pathway no matter which side of the path as we come more into the middle, we're going to grow and evolve, right? So some people have to calm their minds and connect to their feelings. Other people have to let go of their feelings as being the primary guidance system. Empaths have to do this. Like we have feelings, but we're more than our feelings. We have a body, but we're more than our body. We have thoughts, but we're more than our thoughts. And that thing that's more than is our consciousness, is our true self, is our higher self.
Mhm.
And all the pathways lead to that. You know,
Yeah.
everything is an invitation to become more of our higher self. And for some people, it's about quieting the mind and feeling more. For other people, it's about becoming a little more commonsensical.
Yes. That's a great point. And so I want to ask you about this too, because I remember when I first came into, I started with Reiki and meditation at the same time. And that word grounding came up a lot. And I'm an Aquarius. Listen, if I'm anything, it's not that, right? So I kept being told, even in my psychic development classes, they were like, put your feet on the floor. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to. But it was never explained to me the reason. So it was like I was very resistant towards it because one, it wasn't what I was used to, but also I didn't understand what the purpose was. So later on, just through practice and having these experiences of noticing, like, oh, this is what it's like to be like here and present and aware,
Yeah.
and starting to recognize I have to be here present and aware to manage all of this, then I was into it. I was like, okay, I'm okay to ground, right? Could you talk a little bit about the benefit of even starting there? Because a lot of people, when they think of psychic development, just want to jump up into the upper chakras and don't necessarily understand why the connection to body is so important.
So important. And that's why I'm such a stickler with the ground clear protect protocol right off the bat.
Yeah.
When I teach psychic development, we're going to start with that. And I think that, from a really wide perspective here in spiritual development, it's just what we were talking about a minute ago. Like we are meant to integrate our human experience and our spiritual experience. We
Yeah.
are, we're not meant to bypass our human experience and, escape and dissociate. Really,
Yeah.
that's what that is. So we have to be, and like I was saying that, I learned as a martial artist that I had no power if I wasn't fully in my body. So grounding has a couple of different parts to it. There's mentally being in the present moment. That's an important part. So bringing your like mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
Bringing your mind into the here and now. So we're not thinking about the past. We're not thinking about the future. We're mentally present. It's about in being embodied. So our consciousness is fully in our physicality. Like we're embodied. We're not like floating above ourselves, like a balloon. We're inside. And then we take that and we connect it to the earth. So being super connected to the actual, that's why they're telling you to put your feet on the floor.
Yes.
Because we have chakras on the soles of our feet that, that connect us down to the earth star chakra and the grounding cord, which is really like an extension of our first chakra, the root chakra, that goes down into the earth. And we are meant to be like, as humans, this sort of step between heaven and earth, right?
Yeah.
Moving earthly energy up, like this Kundalini energy, Shakti energy up through our chakras. This, they spin up, and we take this earthly experience and we bring it back up to divine. And then we run the energy the other way too. So we bring divine energy, we spin it through our chakras and we ground it into the earth. And that's what, like the highest, that's when we're living in our higher self, when that process is happening fully. And then we're just manifesting our higher self onto the planet and doing what we came here to do. And all the things that we experience, all the traumas we have, all the unprocessed emotions that we have, all the glitches in our system prevent that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
They like literally interrupt that energy flow. And I think that's what we came here to work on. That's our work to do, is to clear. Old school psychics called it clearing the channel, which was, getting our stuff out of the way so we can be really clear channels.
Yeah, I still call it that. Like clearing the channel. So I have a question for you. One, well, I'll ask you this before I ask you about the book really quickly. Some people, their hesitation is like, can I turn this off? Like if am I going to just be stuck seeing, feeling all day long? Can you talk a little bit about the management and how do you have like an arrangement, a schedule, or is it you tune in and out when you choose?
So that you absolutely can turn it on, and you should. It's one of the first things we learn in psychic development class is how to turn it on and how to turn it off. And what we do, professional psychics do, is we learn to shift our brainwave state at will.
Yeah.
So when we're in the beta brainwave, which is the waking, talking, learning brainwave, we're mostly off. And when we're in the alpha state, we're mostly on. So that's what I do I learned it kind of early because my hippie parents took me to Silva mind control. They used to call it Silva mind control. Now it's called the Silva method. Back when I was in high school, and they talked about these brainwave states, and they talked about how to shift into the alpha brainwave, which is where we're intuitive, where we're psychic, where we go in meditation. So it's simple but not easy. It's a simple concept of learning how to shift your brainwave state at will. That's the basic idea, But there's also like rituals we can do. So maybe you to start a psychic session, you light a candle and you play a chime and you put your incense. You go through like a little ritual, and that drops your brainwave down into that alpha, and then you back out of it. Like you blow out the candle. You can imagine like I'm turning on. I used to when I was little. Imagine turning off the TV, hitting the remote control, turning off,
Yep.
You might even visualize like, the closed for business sign on a store, open for business, closed for business.
Yeah.
And these things can just shift our state into whether we're open or whether we're closed, and it takes for me like a little bit of like willpower to close it, keep it closed. So when I go out, it makes me think of like the horses with the blinders on,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just in Trader Joe's trying to buy vegetables. Okay. Like, I don't want to know everything about everybody. And I'm just here trying to do my thing. And I can shift into that mode, and I put myself in my energy shield, and it's not a problem for me. Like, I learned how to do that. Um, and really anyone can. And it's a really, really important part so that we can feel masterful. We can feel in control of our psychic abilities, something really anyone can learn how to do.
Yeah. For me, it's very sensational. Like listening to you say it, I realize for me, I know what I feel like when I'm in different states. And
Yeah.
so without even thinking about it, I'll use my breath to shift me into the feeling of being in a certain state. And then I use my breath to come right back down into,
Yeah.
like that beta feeling. Yeah. It's very
Yeah.
interesting. So I wanted to ask you about the book, Awakening Your Psychic Ability. Again, that's your new book because again, we met you during the Art of Psychic Reiki, and then you had the Energy Healing for Empaths, that
Yeah.
other book. And now you have Awakening Your Psychic Ability. So would you say that this book is for, just like you said, some people it's like on too much, or some people want to turn it on? Would you recommend this for anyone? I would think it would be for anyone, even if they didn't know, like if they had no curiosity. It's just good information to have if we're in this realm, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's definitely for skill training. So it's a very practical book with a lot of exercises, a lot of talks about brainwave states.
Hmm.
And how do we do that? How do we interpret the information we get? So really teaching the skills,
Yeah.
but that we talked about a lot already. How do we access our clairs? How do we trust that the information we're getting is real? How do we know it's a real hit and not just the stuff we make up in our own heads? And it's full of that kind of really practical skill based information. And I think it's sort of, I literally have a map of the psychic worlds in there because I like a structure and a method to things, the way that I learn and the way that I teach. And I feel like when we first open psychically, it feels really random and really overwhelming, and like crazy stuff just happens that we can't have no control over.
Yeah.
But literally, there's a map that I write about in this book, that shows us how to what's in the psychic realms even, and how do we navigate through the map. Kind of going back to my analogy of being street smart, right? If you have a map and you have a guide and you have skills, you don't have to be afraid. You can just navigate yourself out of the danger zone and where you want to go. So that it's a super practical. I'm pretty practical for a psychic, honestly. And I want to help people. I really write not, with very common language. It's not a lot of woo-woo, even though it's a woo-woo topic. So my goal of that is to make it accessible really for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great thing. And I remember again, when I first met you, I was so excited about your book because at that time, again, I had only had the experience of people saying this is so separate from Reiki, but that wasn't my personal experience. So, yeah, I remember I was very excited about your book. And of course, we'll put the link down in the show description. But that leads me into as well. I saw on your site you teach psychic Reiki very specifically.
Yeah.
So, in your Reiki training, there's this already teaching or unification of psychic development and Reiki. Is that how it
Yeah.
goes?
Yeah. I just teach them together. So Reiki 1, I'm teaching also all the traditional things people learn in Reiki 1, but I'm also teaching energy management.
Hmm.
These energy management basics that we've been talking about, really talking about the clairs.
Yeah.
How does the information come through? In Reiki 2, I'm talking more about Reiki guides, because I think it's at the Reiki 2 attunement that people really get access to their Reiki guides. And that's also not every Reiki teacher wants to talk about that, or
Right.
it's not always included in the curriculum, right? But I totally know we all have guides that are working with us when we're doing it, when we're giving Reiki, when we're receiving Reiki, and when we're on our healing journey. And in Reiki 3, I teach a lot about how to weave our intuitive hits and psychic hits into our sessions. What do you do if you're minding your own business in a Reiki session and your client's granny shows up or an angel is there, or something is there. How do we, I talk a lot about ethics is another thing that I really go on and on about. What's our ethical responsibility? What do we share? What do we don't share? And how do we do that in a way that doesn't violate other people's boundaries? So that's sort of a lot of the conversation in Reiki level 3. How do we weave it into our practice as Reiki practitioners?
Yeah, again, I think that's probably exciting to hear for a lot of people that, haven't had anyone talk about this so openly as you do. Now, one other thing, a couple of other things, you do have a podcast as well where people can hear more from
Mm.
you and your guest. You have the Miracle of Healing podcast. Is that just on the streaming platforms? Is it also YouTube? How do we
Right
access?
now, it's just on the streaming platforms. That's where you can find it.
Okay.
I do have a YouTube channel that has a lot of videos and free trainings. And like, if you want that ground clear protect meditation that keep talking about, you can find it on YouTube, my YouTube channel. So there's a lot of really great resources there on the YouTube channel for sure. And the podcast you can find, mostly I'm interviewing other healers and talking about healing modalities and all the different ways we can do that.
Yeah.
And thought leaders, authors. It's really an incredible, I feel so lucky to be able to talk to the incredible people that I meet on my podcast.
Yes.
And you can find it across any streaming platform.
Good to know. I listen, I feel the same. I understand. But you also have another event coming up in Colorado, and that's May 8th to the 10th, Sacred Awakening. Could you tell us a little bit about that for anyone who may want to go or in the area?
Yeah, sure. So that's Humanity's Team is Bruce Lipton's organization, and he brings together some of the best thought leaders in the world. And we're talking about sacred awakening, this quantum shift that we're in, this ascension of human consciousness. And you can also attend virtually. So they have a virtual ticket. It's quite humbling for me. I'm getting on the stage right before Greg Braden.
Oh,
Um, he's one of like my heroes and, absolute like thought leaders in the world. Michael Beckwith will be there. Susan Giesman, who's I think one of the best teachers for mediumship. So really all my people whose books I've been reading forever are going to be there. And I'm so thrilled to be included in it.
yeah. Oh, no, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the nerves, especially with people that you admire coming out.
Oh my gosh. I can't even, I don't know.
Wow. Yeah. Well, but then you have all of these great skills to ground and clear, and
Yep,
you have
that's
all of
right.
the things to be able to do.
I'm sure I'll tell you, I'll be using all of my tricks.
Yeah. Well, and that too. So this is, where we'll wrap it up together. As you mentioned, like this quantum healing. Earlier, you also mentioned about the way even collectively we're going through this time of awakening. And so I think ultimately it's important for us to have a better understanding of our function and our relationship to universal intelligence. And Reiki, like you said, is often a gateway. It opens us up to a lot of that recognition, but to also be in relationship to our full function and capacity. Again, it only makes sense to me that you would not just rely on the analytical, but also learn to be in relationship with the intuitive. So I just wanted to ask you if there's anything you want to say about that and the work you're doing, why it's so important that you've blended the two this way.
It's so important, I think, Yolanda, because our higher self speaks to us through our intuition. It really doesn't have any way to speak to your mind.
Mhm.
Your mind's got another function and, it's busy doing its thing. So our higher self communication comes through our intuitive senses, through our psychic senses. Our team of guides are speaking to us through our psychic senses.
Yeah.
I always define intuition as your own inner knowing, and it's how your higher self speaks to you. And psychic is when it's outside of ourselves. So it's our team, our spiritual team, our team of guides who are helping us. And it's getting kind of crazy out there in the world right now. And I feel like now more than ever, we can be guided through the, challenging times that we live in, this time of change that we live in, by following our intuition. It's like navigating the whitewater, and our intuitive senses, there's nothing better to help us through that time. And I really noticed it when the in the pandemic started and people were, nobody knew what to do. We kind of all had to fall back on our intuition. Your intuition might be like, quit your boring job and move to Vermont and have a goat farm.
Right,
You
right.
know, and like that's what so many people did.
Yeah.
Right. And that's good. So I think that as we continue to move through this time of transition that we're in, we absolutely need to fall into a deeper communication with our higher self and our spirit team.
Oh, that is so good. And I think to your point, the evidence of that I've seen a lot is it's not just anymore people who want to necessarily be healers, so to speak, but a lot of people are coming to this work just to like initiate self-healing in some ways, but again, just to understand themselves different and how to navigate their life different and how to move through the world without feeling overwhelmed by the chaos.
Yes.
Yeah, and this work is incredible for that. So it really is for everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're in a human body, like, yeah,
Yeah.
you should probably.
We need this and to navigate and also to be of service.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean you have to stop your day job and be a healer, but you will be of service in some way, you know, even if it's just your intuition tells you to turn around and talk to the person behind you in the checkout line.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that you're somebody's angel that day, or that's how your Reiki practice looks today. So I think it's so important for both of those things.
yeah, 100%. Well, I have to tell you, Lisa, I'm so glad we got to have another conversation. I thank you for coming by. And for everyone listening, be sure to go to Lisa's website, lisacampion.com, and follow her on Instagram at Lisa X Campion. And the links for all of that are in the show description. I'll also put the links to your books. And the new book is Awakening Your Psychic Ability. So many goodies you have for us out here. So,
So much, Yolanda. Thank you so much for
yeah,
having me on your podcast again.
of course, my love. And everyone else, will see you soon. Bye for now. Okay, my loves, thank you so much for joining Lisa and I for this conversation. And thank you, Lisa, for taking the time to join us here on Reiki Radio. If you want to learn more about Lisa and her work, again, you can visit her website, which is lisacampion.com. And her Instagram is at Lisa X Campion. So I will put the links to connect with her down in the show description. Don't forget also that Lisa has a podcast called The Miracle of Healing podcast, and you can listen to that wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I want to thank you all so much for being here. There's a lot of upcoming events and classes that I have, so be sure that you visit theenergeticalchemist.com. You want to make sure to sign up for the newsletter because I always send, energy of the month updates. I also let you know about upcoming events. In fact, there's an upcoming Reiki Mastery Weekend event that is happening the first weekend of May, and it's being put on by Reiki Rays, and I will be one of the co-hosts. So this is different than the Reiki Rays Global Healing Summit in that for this particular Reiki Mastery Weekend, it's live. And instead of just, conversations between the hosts and the guest, you actually are going to participate in what's more like mini classes, mini workshops. So you will receive guidance and learn some techniques from some of your favorite teachers that perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to work with yet. I can tell you that one of my teachers will be participating, and that is Franz Steiner. He is one of the teachers that you will be able to learn from during this incredible weekend. So this takes place May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. On May 2nd, there is an open invitation for you to come and get an introduction to the weekend. And then the actual workshop takes place on the 3rd and the 4th. So please be sure you can go to my website or on my Instagram under Reiki Radio. There is a link in my profile to my link tree, and you can access the link to register today for the Reiki Mastery Weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that is it. I'm so glad I didn't forget to tell you that. Have a beautiful weekend, my loves, and I will see you soon. Remember to always journey in love.